Today we're going to talk about the elements and principles of design. These are the tools and rules that can help create strong artwork. There will be an exit ticket you have to complete as well as a quiz later, so make sure that you're paying attention. Notice that there's a link on the bottom right in which you could follow along and take some notes if you'd like to do so. I always suggest doing this as it will help you later, and it's why I put the link in the presentation for class. You can go back in the recording and catch things you may have missed later, and you can also handwrite the notes in your sketchbook or on the printed Cornell note sheets in class. The first thing we need to consider is how the elements and principles can be used to defend the choices made in your artwork. It's why we ask you to reflect on it in each submission and expect you to highlight the terminology you've been learning about in class. Another important item is talking about the strong work Venn diagram. Here you can see it on the left. Hopefully what you can see is that using the elements and principles is just one part of creating strong artwork. You also have to know and be able to design around the rule of thirds, experiment with media and techniques, and communicate something about the larger world around you for your work to be really strong. It's just like working out or practicing for whatever sport you're in. It makes you stronger by applying good and sometimes new and different techniques than what you did before in order to get better. If you look over at the image on the right, there is an Elements and Principles of Design logo. When we think of the elements of art, we are thinking about 7 things: line, shape, value, space, color, texture, and form. These are the items or elements that we use to create objects and pictures. Likewise, the 8 principles of design help govern how the elements are used to make work stronger and more aesthetically pleasing to our human eyes. The principles of design are balance, contrast, emphasis, proportion, repetition, variation, movement, and unity. So first we're going to talk about the elements of art. The elements are what are used to create a design, and the principles dictate how they're used. Depending on your understanding of these terms and how to apply them, you will create works that vary in success. The key is to keep practicing because you'll get better the more you practice, just like you would with a sport, a musical instrument, or a language. Line is a continuous mark made on a surface by a utensil or tool. It's longer than it is wide, and it can vary in width. In drawing and painting, a line can also be used to create the entire drawing, such as this horse in contour line in the drawing on the right. Next we have shape. Shape is a line that is closed upon itself. It has length and width. In drawing, many shapes are combined, making the drawing more interesting to look at. The repetition of the shapes is one thing that makes drawings strong. Color is how light reflects on an object and interacts with human vision, causing us to see things such as red, yellow, or blue. In this drawing, color makes the artwork interesting for others to view, and it takes a lot of practice for a 2D artist to master. Here we have value, which is the lightness and darkness of a surface. The whitest white, the blackest black, and each gray in between. It can also be applied to color. Here you can see such an expert use of value that the drawing looks almost photographic. Space is an element that surrounds us. It can be either positive or negative. If you look at the drawing on the right, you can see the purple negative spaces of the mirror as well as the negative black space behind the mirror. Negative spaces are a great way to separate different objects in a composition. To create texture, we are talking about the quality of a surface as it relates to the sense of touch. In this drawing, look at the whiskers and the fur on this cat. It looks like it feels soft, which is what the illusion of texture in a drawing or painting should do. Form is the surface of an object as described three-dimensionally. We create the illusion of form in 2D media with value and color. Moving on to the principles of design, you should notice that these terms are how the elements are used in a drawing or painting, or any object you create. Contrast refers to the arrangement of opposite elements, light versus dark, rough versus smooth textures, large versus small shapes, to create visual interest, excitement, and drama. The image on the right has more contrast added to the highlights and shadows in the objects, making them easier to see. So even though these are the same drawing, the one on the right is much easier to see because of the contrast in each object. Moving on to unity, it is a term that means oneness, or how the artwork works together as a whole in terms of the other elements of design, shape, color, line, texture, etc. Often, unity can be seen in the repetition of an element of design. For example, here you can see the pink in the background as well as in the hands and feet. Emphasis is where your eye goes to first in a piece of art. It's also called the focal point or center of interest. When you look at these pieces, hopefully you will notice the emphasis in each piece. In the popsicle drawing on the right, the emphasis is the yellow popsicle because it's the only yellow object in the piece and it's the only popsicle that is a single popsicle. Balance is a sense of stability in a piece of artwork. It can be asymmetrical, symmetrical, or radial. This slide shows you a version of each type of balance so you can visually see what they look like. The easiest to understand is the symmetrical example on the right. It can be divided in half vertically or horizontally and it would look the same. Looking at the musical drawing, you can see that the music swirling from the center of the drawing, which is why it's radial. Lastly, you can see the elephants at the very bottom of the page, and there is not much at the top, which is why the piece is asymmetrical. There is no way you could divide this paper and have the objects be the same. Repetition and variation are often used together when designing objects or drawings. Repetition is used first and is the use of an element of design used over and over in a piece of artwork. Here you can see the circles and triangles that are repeated in this drawing. The repetition creates interest for us to look at. Variation can be defined by changes, large or small, in the repetition of a piece of art. This can create a pattern. In this drawing, for example, you can see that the stems of the apples are going in multiple directions. In addition, the negative space of the orange behind the apples is different on each side of each apple, which is again creating more variation. Next, we have movement. Movement is defined as the path one's eye follows while looking at a piece of art. It is successfully used when the artist arranges objects in a piece with diagonals so the viewer's eye is forced to move around the composition. Here, the arms and legs of the dancer create diagonals that draw your eye from one part of the dancer to another. The floor, line, and bar are also at diagonals, which further move your eye around the composition. Last but not least, we have proportion, which is how the size and shape of one object compare to those around it. Here you can see a person doing a dragon kick in an alley. The person looks proportional to the building because the bricks are smaller than the person, which is normally the way bricks look on a building when compared to the human body. Although craftsmanship is not an element or principle of design, it is important to note that the skill or neatness in which you create something often is noticed by other people. The more you take pride in making a high-quality object, the more ability and confidence you will have. You will also probably be able to sell your artwork or even do that type of art as a side hustle.